Preludes 13 brought some big changes to weapon damage, and Grace does much more than this little info card would lead you to believe. So let's talk about how weapon damage, attunements, and blessed joinery work in this new system. Preludes 13 just dropped last Friday, so I'm expecting hotfixes to arrive as I work on this video. If we get any big changes to the systems we're talking about, you'll hear from future Sarah with an update. But in the meanwhile, I think it's important to talk about how players are impacted by the systems we have right now. Let's start with weapon damage basics. An unranked weapon will show you that weapon's base stats. So, if we look at this freshly crafted Seathorn on a build that doesn't meet the virtue requirement, we can see that its base stats give us 44 attack damage, 88 charged attack damage, and 16 stagger. As I level up this Seathorn, those base stats will increase, with each level granting a specific bonus. Check the description if you want to see exactly what you get at each level, but by the time you get a weapon up to level 30, you'll have gained 24 damage, which shows up here on your weapon's info panel, and is included in this number, which is your weapon's effective attack damage. Verite, Gildor, and Quicksilver Joinery also add base damage to your weapon, as can some packed upgrades like Orengal's Soulbound. Those bonuses will be added to both this number here showing your bonus damage, and to this number showing the weapon's effective attack damage. Once you meet your weapon's virtue requirement, you will also gain additional damage that scales according to your weapon's attunements. Each virtue pip corresponds to half a point of damage per point in that virtue. So, a 3-pip Spirit attunement will give you 1.5 points of damage per point in Spirit. This virtue scaling is pretty similar to what we had in Preludes 12, but in Preludes 13, split virtue weapons now have multiple pips in each of the virtues they scale with. The P12 Paragon only had 1 pip in each virtue, but now it has 2 in each, and it has no virtue requirement. This makes the Paragon the most versatile weapon in Soulframe, since it is the only weapon that will be equally effective on any build. I do think that's a great place for the Paragon to be, but the degree to which virtue requirements limit other weapons is way too harsh. You will not gain any attunement damage if you do not meet your weapon's virtue requirement, even if the weapon has split scaling and you do have plenty of virtue points in one of those 2 virtues. So, let's say I want to run a Courage Spirit split on Garen Rood so that I can take advantage of the synergy between Torment and Behest. Even if I use the strongest Grace Talisman in the game and max out Sapphine's Gift for more Grace, I still can't hit the Grace virtue requirement for Blitzel, and thus won't get any damage from the 2 pips of Courage scaling. If a hotfix brings changes to Sapphine's Gift so that it once again grants 10 points instead of 4, then hitting Blitzel's Grace requirement would at least be possible using the Courage Spirit Hybrid Prism, but my virtues will end up closer to an even allocation, not the Courage Spirit split I was going for. I could also use a Virtue Potion to get my virtue requirement. Drinking a Grace Potion will give me 10 points in Grace for 60 minutes, which does neatly solve this requirement problem, but then, once again, even after adjusting my packed upgrades, I end up with something closer to an even distribution than the Courage Spirit split I wanted. We also need to keep in mind that you must be rank 2 in each faction to purchase the Virtue Potion recipes, and each one cost 4,500 standing, so they are not at all a practical solution for new players. The bottom line is that our current virtue requirements limit how we can engage with our packed arcanics. Massively reducing those requirements would ease this pressure significantly and make the system more accessible to new players, but I want to make an argument for why those requirements should be removed entirely, and to do that we need to talk about Blessed Joinery. In Preludes 12, Blessed Joinery would completely change the attunement of your weapon from one virtue to another, leaving the strength of the attunement unchanged. In Preludes 13, Blessed Joinery adds 1 pip of attunement in the virtue of that joinery's blessing. So, if I reforge my Starling with Quicksilver blessed by Saphine, it goes from having 2 pips of Grace attunement to having 3 pips of Grace attunement. I could add a pip of attunement to a completely new virtue. For example, if I reforge my Ursula with Gildor blessed by Iridis, I'd end up with 2 pips of Courage attunement, 2 pips of Grace attunement, and 1 pip of Spirit attunement. But it is almost always more efficient to strengthen an existing attunement rather than add 1 pip of a new attunement. There are virtue damage caps in Preludes 13. These are what we called attunement caps in earlier Preludes, but now that our virtue distribution is controlled by prisms, it's easier to think of them as damage caps. A common weapon has a damage cap of double that weapon's base damage. An uncommon weapon caps at 2.5 times base damage, and a rare weapon probably caps at 3 times base damage, although hitting that cap is not easy, so we're just theorizing on that one. There seem to be at least some exceptions to this rule, although it's not yet clear to me why those exceptions exist or if there is a pattern to them, but this is how damage caps are calculated for most weapons. These caps limit the amount of damage you can gain through virtue bonuses. Other damage bonuses, like those from Joinery, weapon level, and pact passives, get added after virtue damage. It's worth noting that these are your basic attack damage caps. Charged attacks do still have a higher cap, but they are now so high that hitting them will be quite difficult with what's currently in game. Thinking about damage caps in this way is particularly helpful in Preludes 13 because it allows you to compare weapons without needing to change your build. Just take your weapon's effective attack damage, subtract the bonus shown here to get the base damage, and then multiply that times 2 for common weapons, 2.5 for uncommon weapons, or 3 for rare weapons. This will allow you to compare the max damage potential of your weapons before Joinery. Remember, this system is supposed to be simpler. Jokes aside, I do like this new system much better, and here's why. When we were able to fully change the attunements of any weapon, each grip type ended up having one weapon that was simply best in that category. There wasn't much reason to have any of the other weapons, and as much as I liked how this let us play any weapon with any virtue, it did make many weapons largely obsolete. Now the weapon attunements once again give each weapon its own character. Even though Juniper's damage potential is higher than Blitzel, Blitzel still has a place in my builds because of its courage attunement. The changes to Blessed Joinery make this even better. Without Joinery, Juniper is just a better alternative to Maestro, but if I bless one of them with Spirit and the other with Grace, now they lean in different directions for different builds, and I can enhance that difference even further by choosing Quicksilver Joinery for one and Gildor for the other. We don't need virtue requirements to protect this diversity. If I want to run that Courage Spirit split on Garen Rude, I'd still get less damage from my Blitzel even without the virtue requirement, because I'd only benefit from the Courage on my build, not the Spirit. There's still incentive to run Grace, but I'd be able to choose to forego that extra damage to boost my Pact Arcanics in the way that I want. You can technically do this now if you're willing to forego all virtue damage, but that is a heavy price to pay for no real reason, because we already have another incentive to use Grace on Grace-attuned weapons. Aside from giving you bonus damage to finishers and attacks on unalerted enemies, Grace also gives an extra 1.2% headshot multiplier per point in Grace. I completely missed this at first because I mistook that unalerted attack bonus for a headshot bonus, but all weapons do get an extra headshot multiplier that scales with Grace, and it applies to all headshots. This is a significant bonus. I definitely judged Grace too harshly in my first impressions, and I'm having a lot of fun with full Grace bow builds. This does not seem to work if you add a Grace pip through Blessed Joinery. All weapons with a natural Grace attunement also get an extra 0.3 damage per point of Grace in addition to the normal attunement scaling. So if you have any weapon with a Grace attunement on it, there's already a heavy incentive to use it with a Grace build. And if, for example, DE were to add a bow with a Courage Spirit attunement split, maybe an Ode-themed bow, for example, we would be trading all those Grace bonuses for the ability to use a bow in a non-Grace build, which keeps that feeling of Grace being a special virtue for bows without limiting our build options. So this new system of weapon scaling and Blessed Joinery gives us plenty of incentive to play into a weapon's natural attunement and to use all the weapons currently available to us. In Preludes 13, Longblades are by far the best grip type in the game because of the available variety of weapons and attunements. Shields are the worst because there are only 2 to choose from and both require courage. I hope that Soulframe's future sees more weapons in every grip type with attunements that are atypical for that weapon's category. Flyblades already have Thrice Spurned with its courage attunement, and Longblades have Dwellion with its grace attunement, so even if we continue to see attunement norms for each grip type, these unique exceptions can fill a special niche in our buildcraft that is really fun to play with. And on top of that, I still hope we see virtue requirements removed altogether. There is plenty of incentive to play into your weapon's attunement rather than against it without the harsh damage nerf from not meeting the virtue requirement. Removing those requirements would open up tons of possibilities for endgame buildcraft, and, much more importantly, they would make every weapon much more accessible for new players. Even reduced virtue requirements are still going to be tough on new envoys with fewer virtue points to spend. Removing the requirements will make those weapons more fun for people to experiment with while they learn the game, and they'll still have all the many good reasons to invest in that weapon's natural attunements. So that's how weapon damage works in Preludes 13. I could not have made this video without the generous help and mathematical brilliance of Kemi, whom you might remember as the winner of the Avocat's Choice Award at the TennoCon 2025 cosplay contest, and who is eagerly awaiting the addition of target dummies. I hope this video helped you understand the recent changes to weapon damage and joinery. If hotfixes bring us any other big changes, I'll post updates in a pinned comment, so make sure you check there for the latest info. What's your favorite weapon in Preludes 13? Let me know in the comments. And until next time, happy hunting!